Want to build your career with CMI confidence? Well, it all starts with the tools at your fingertips. CMI creates workplaces full of inspiring leaders with its on-demand resources, network of mentors and industry-leading accreditations. Search CMI Confidence today.
This session is recorded and will be available on the CMI website and YouTube channel. Join the conversation by using the live chat box for your questions and comments. We'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Bolt, and welcome to The Time Is Now, the Role of Sustainability in Leadership digital event. I am, as I said, Michael Bolt, and I am the Events Delivery Manager at CMI. Don't forget to join the conversation by using the live chat box, and we'll seek to answer as many questions as we can during the Q&A. And without any delay, I'll now hand over to Iain Tinniswood, who is our stakeholder lead for our CMI Scotland board, to begin today's event. Over to you, Iain.
Thank you very much, Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at our latest CMI Scotland digital engagement session. As Mike was saying there, please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from. Please put any questions as you go on into the chat. We'd like to make this as engaging a session as possible. If we don't have time to respond to your questions today, we will endeavour to do so through maybe LinkedIn or other comms. So please don't be shy about anything that comes to mind. Following on from the success of our in-person event in November, very kindly hosted by the University of Strathclyde, we are honoured to welcome back Professor Iain Black and Dr. Rebecca Wade to take part in our session today. The time is now, the role of sustainability in leadership. So Iain is a Professor of Sustainable Consumption at the University of Strathclyde, Director of the Climate Solutions Programme, and active within sustainability policy forums and charities. His main area of expertise and interests are in the fields of sustainable consumption and climate change, contributing to the UN Sustainability Development Goals of 12, 4 and 13, so sustainable consumption products, quality education and climate action. His research focuses on why people choose not to consume, responses to scarcity, and why we say we will act sustainably but don't. Rebecca is a senior lecturer in environmental science at Abertay University in Dundee. Her teaching and research and lecturing focus on sustainable water management and nature-based solutions, and inspiring the next generation of civil engineers and environmental managers to work collectively on sustainability to address climate, nature and societal changes and challenges. Additionally, she is an award-winning STEM ambassador, was named Woman of Influence 2022 by Action for Children Scotland, and in 2024 was named as one of the top 50 women in engineering by the Women's Engineering Society. So we are in very capable hands this afternoon. Iain, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming back and doing another event with us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you both here today, and I am incredibly excited to listen to your expert thoughts and opinions on the role of sustainability in leadership.
Delighted to be here, and hope I can live up to that introduction.
You absolutely will. So look, I think to kick things off, question for you both, and perhaps Iain, I can come to you first, but why have you dedicated your career to being a leader in sustainability, and what motivates you?
So when I was having a think about this, I was down a set of cyclepaths in Edinburgh, which are sort of covered in nature there, and it kind of really brought me back to where I grew up, where I born in Glasgow, born in Clydebank, moved down to leafy Sussex when I was a child, and I was just surrounded by nature. I was a child of the 70s. We explored. We ate apples that fell from the trees. We went strawberry picking every year and blackberry. I was just surrounded by this sumptuous nature experience. and being connected in there in a place that just brought me all the joy and the naughtiness that a child of the 70s had. I was always found polluters, and in particular, those who drop litter and as a child, and then moving on to something exponentially worse, these sort of industrial polluters. I always found myself getting really angry at these people, just selfish human beings for destroying what we have, sort of arrogant and short-sighted, and that's been a kind of a burning part of what it is that sort of brought me to this. And then I did my undergraduate dissertation on the purchase of environmental dishwashing powder back in 1992, and the next part of my sort of journey into this was becoming a parent. And I think I've moved from kind of some value and experiences then from there into a sense of crisis. That I, as any parent, or as any as any uncle or any aunt, anyone with a family of if your friends, your friends are your family, you want a decent life for these people, and I want a decent life for my children and my grandchildren, and I want them for yours, and I want them for those in the global south, where prosperity is shared. And we are systematically and callously undermining this ability to prosper. And we're getting to the point now where we can see, we can look people in the eye and say, it's going to be your children's grandchildren. They're the ones who are going to live with catastrophic climate change on our current path. This is those words are very carefully chosen because they're chosen from the IPCC lexicon. These are scientific words used in this. What we're now looking at is our children's grandchildren who are going to have to live with the shared socioeconomic pathway, predicting on this modest action that we take of a 3 to 4.5 degree increase, and that is catastrophic. And what motivates me is to try and do whatever I possibly can to avoid that, to inspire, to change and support young leaders as they come through the university. I've always enjoyed challenging the status quo, I think. And what motivates me around that as well is I am blessed, and Rebecca is a brilliant example of this, and I thank the CMI for putting this together, is I just meet brilliant people all the time who are also in many ways engaged in this, the challenge of our age, and people who are trying to make the world a better place, and working with them is inspiring.
Magnificent. Thank you, and Rebecca, please, same to you as well. Thank you.
Well, first of all, right back at you, Iain Black. It's great to be in contact with you, and wonderful to find people with energy and enthusiasm for the things that I also really care about. And a big thank you to CMI for inviting us here today. So I think the question was what motivates or inspires me to do what I do. And I just love nature. It's absolutely amazing. The natural world is absolutely blooming brilliant. It gives me joy, it cheers me up, it refreshes and re-energizes me. Sometimes when we've had a lot of Teams meetings or calls and things like that, just a few minutes outside can just make the world of difference to our physical and mental health. And one of the things I know for sure is that if we look after the planet, it'll look after us right back. And so there's no wrong reason, there's nothing stopping us, really. There shouldn't be anything stopping us looking after our planet, our home, because if we don't look after it, we won't have a home to live on. And if we care about ourselves, we need to care about our planet and the world around us. So what motivates me is partly selfish, because I really enjoy, being a person on this planet, getting to explore nature, getting to explore landscapes. I studied geography at university because I was so keen on understanding how people and landscapes interacted and the effect that one has on the other. And so I guess that's where I'm coming from. I see that it's not just you, Iain, and some people in the chat, but I also am a child of the 70s. And maybe that's not a bad thing to be. But I think what you and I both know, and I hope you don't mind me talking for you at the moment, is we have now informed ourselves about the climate crisis and the nature crisis. It's part of what we do. It's part of our daily work. And we know that we're part of the problem. And we know that our parents' generation were part of the problem. And that particularly since the Second World War, but also, starting before that, we have had a great acceleration in industrial activity, in travel, in population, and many other things, including wealth and wealth inequalities and health inequalities. So we've made great advances, but we've been alive in that half century. We've been alive in that time when the majority of what we know are climate emissions that are causing a lot of the problems that we face have been emitted from our terrestrial planet into the atmosphere. And so I think that knowledge that we have as people that work in this field is also what drives us, because we know that we're part of the problem. Even if unwittingly we might have been part of the problem, we now have a huge responsibility to be part of the solution. And if that's not a really good thing to get you up in the morning and drive you forward, I don't know what is. So that's what drives me. And the way I do it is through communication and outreach, but also through my day job of teaching civil and environmental engineers. Because although I have a background in geography, I've chosen to spend more than 2 decades teaching civil and environmental engineers, because they are the ones that design, build, operate, and maintain our environment and our infrastructure, which is where most emissions are generated from. So I'm trying to inspire the next generation to be sustainable designers and sustainable builders and operators of this amazing infrastructure that helps us do our business and move around in the way that we want to, but also we can do it so much better. So that's what drives me forward and inspires me to work in this area.
Thank you. I think that's that's not a selfish motivation at all. I think it's remarkably selfless, actually. It's very inspirational. Thank you. And actually, I wonder if it might be nice if you continued some of that thought and you could let us into a little more detail, Rebecca, around your thoughts around why we need to be more sustainable and the core challenges to achieving that. And Iain, please do just step in when you've got some thoughts. But you've kind of set us up beautifully for that, Rebecca.
Yeah, absolutely. So the amazing thing is that we have so much knowledge. We've got so much information. We're not guessing. So why do we need to be more sustainable? Because, we get to a point every year, and it's earlier and earlier every year, called Earth Overshoot Day. And that is the day when we're using more than one planet's resources to do what we do, our activities as humans on this planet. And this year it's in May. It's not in November or October or even in the summer. It's in May, Earth Overshoot Day. And that means that from May the 20th onwards, we are going beyond the capacity of the resources that we have to live on this planet for a year. Now, anybody can understand that you need assets to run a business. You might need resources. If you don't have enough assets and enough resources, you can't do business. You go broke. So basically, we're broke. What we do on this planet is beyond the resources, the finite resources that we have to do what we want to do on this planet. But we also know that there are ways to alter that. Now, during COVID, during the coronavirus lockdown, we had a situation where people weren't traveling for business or for pleasure as much. People kind of moved around less. There were fewer emissions. And the Earth Overshoot Day did actually creep back a little bit further. And some of those other things that we measure in terms of our emissions of predominantly CO2 or CO2 equivalent did kind of reduce a bit during that time, so that we know that if we change our behaviors, which I see somebody's put in the chat, it can be uncomfortable to change our behaviors, and people are threatened by change, or they feel change resistant, or it's maybe too difficult to think about, so you put it off. I mean, I'm there. I've done that. Everybody's done that. It's change can be hard, but we know that when we have changed, we have made a difference. So not only do we have the evidence that we're causing the problem and that we probably do need to do something about it. We certainly need to do something about it. But we also have seen that we can change. We can make a positive change. So that Earth Overshoot Day can be calculated for every single country in the world. And you've got some countries like Qatar, their Earth Overshoot Day is the 6th of February. They don't even get through more than 6 weeks of the year before they're overshooting their resources, whereas Uruguay's the 17th of December. So we've got even examples on our planet of, different ways of using our resources in terms of thinking about, are we living within our means? And that's all it is. As a kid, even in business, as an adult, as a professional, you have to live within your means. You can't overshoot your means. And right now, from a planetary perspective, we are overshooting our means. So we're going beyond the planetary boundaries that just naturally are there. We have great wealth and great resources on this planet, but we're not using them appropriately. We're not using them sustainably. And we're certainly not enabling future generations to have the same kind of lifestyle and activities and sort of enjoyment of natural resources as we currently are. So why do we need to be sustainable? Because we want to have a future on this planet. And there's no question that the planet will go on beyond our drastic actions, but maybe it won't be habitable for us. So being, again, selfish as a human population, we don't have a choice. We've got to be more sustainable, or else we won't be able to achieve any of our business goals, our societal goals, our personal goals, because it'll just be too difficult to do that. And I know I'm saying that with a smile on my face. It's a very serious issue, but I'm very passionate about trying to encourage people that with a bit of knowledge and a bit of understanding, we can make changes which make a hopeful and optimistic trajectory forward. And we can find the opportunities in that challenge and not just the sort of bad news stories. It's all about finding the opportunities to take it forward. So I think I'll maybe let Iain come in now.
Thanks. There's so much in there to sort of pick up on and just in many ways to echo. But I started my career very much as a consumer psychologist and a pretend one, looking at trying to change people's behaviours. And I've moved further and further out towards the minds of those people who can make the changes very quickly. It's the mindset of our politicians is where we're at the moment. That we need to change. So why do we need to be more sustainable? The basic answer is that it's beyond what Rebecca is saying. If we take it into sort of economic terms, because it's the basis of our society, it's the basis of our economy. You can't generate £1 worth of GDP or any value without something from the environment. And I've said this in other events. I'll happily take anybody's money if they want to bet on that, and I'll come up with a reason that they're wrong. And we've forgotten that. We've fundamentally forgotten that. So the 1970s is a really interesting time for in terms of the footprint that Rebecca was talking about, because on my birthday, 1970, we were barely. It was late into December that Earth Overshoot Day happened. But what we've gone on from there in the economic model we're following, and therefore undermining the economy that we need to have in the future, is that we've forgotten that the economy is constrained by the environment. We've got the situation of supply and demand, of where we've got finite supply, yet infinite demand. Because we can all imagine more things. We can all imagine being billionaires and having all the bells and toys and whistles, and we're told to imagine those, obviously, in the media productions, the films, the videos, the TV series that we look at. So why do we need to be more sustainable? Well, the economy economy's role is to produce social justice. If I was taking a well-being economy definition of this, I say that the economy's role is to produce social justice on a healthy planet, and that decent lives for all. So without that basis of the environment, we can't do those other things. Or what we see is systematically people's ability to prosper being undermined on a daily basis over a season in a certain type of place in the world. We just need to look at every week you can come up with I've stopped updating my slides when it comes to examples of the climate emergency, because all I just need to say to the students is, well, what's this week's emergency? Now, where's the disaster been this week? And the one that I've been paying attention to is the one of the typhoon in the Gold Coast. There's some really stark pictures. I mean, if any of you have been to the Gold Coast, the Sunshine Coast, it's absolute heaven on earth. I mean, lived in Australia for a number of years, and you've got the prosperity of this coast fundamentally being undermined now because the beach has been destroyed. There's pictures of where the beach did slope nicely down to the water, and now there's a 2-meter gap. So I think there are stark examples of how we need to be more sustainable for the basis of our economy, because with the economy and the role of that economy to keep to produce social justice, and where I think the real challenges of achieving this are not in the level of knowledge that we have. It's not in the science that we have. The only bit of science that we, I think, are lacking is how do we change and challenge the mindsets of our leaders. And in there, I think we've got an idea of what we need to do, and maybe come on to that in a later question around the stories and impact. But I think we have to absolutely, the challenges to achieving to be more sustainable are around this economic growth fetish that really stopped working for us in around about the 1970s. Growth worked for us. GDP growth worked for humanity. For the western half of humanity to 1970s. Then we overshot our ecological footprint, and the growth started to be extracted up. Forget, and we all know that the notion of a trickle-down economy is nonsense. We're in a hoovering up economy. So the GDP was extracted away, making life better for the multinationals and tougher for the SMEs. So I think there's a number of things that we've got to challenge the mindset of this economic growth fetish. I mean, Starmer, Keir Starmer, Kevin Badenoch, Sweeney, they're all going to fail in producing GDP growth, and they're going to fail in producing decent health, decent work opportunities, a decent economy for people. Go back to this point, because we know this. We've got the evidence to suggest it. So the first thing we do to give us the space to become more sustainable is get away from the things that are causing the damage in the first place, and that's thinking that we can continually grow our economy on a finite planet. That's just flat. The other thing I would suggest in there about what we achieve is we've got to recognise it's an emergency that won't go away, and from that comes a clear sense of unwavering prioritisation and direction. And it might seem trying to desperately hold on to some good news, that in many ways Europe's response to Ukraine can be seen as good news, because what it demonstrates is when our leaders recognise there's an emergency and that there's a clear sense of direction and that there is a clear threat, then bang, 800 billion euros are made available. Because it's the one thing that's really dangerous thinking is for our leaders to say, we have to balance the books. We're like anybody, balancing a country's books is the same as balancing the books in a home. They are fundamentally different things. 800 billion could be produced, and imagine the lives that we could produce, the amazing infrastructure, the insulated homes, the vertical farms, the community-based power that we could create. Imagine the jobs and the lives that we produce if we took that 800 billion into solving the climate crisis, rather than keeping multinational arms firms and oil companies in business.
That is profound in so many ways. I think, and a little bit depressing.
Do you want me to come in with some good news on that then?
Yeah, yes.
So what we have heard absolutely with clarity from Iain Black is that, there's an absolute imperative here. There's a desperate need to do things differently for ourselves as well as for nature. We know that we've got multiple crises. We've got polycrises going on. We've got a climate crisis. We've got a nature crisis. We're losing so much of our, biodiversity and nature. We also have a health and poverty crisis. We've got a mental health crisis. We've got economic crises, and we've got conflicts and other crises which have just already been referred to. This gives us a very difficult platform to start making change from, because we see individual ones of those crises, we see individual people within those. But the good news that I promised you is that sometimes when we address climate change and we do it from a collaborative and multi-benefit perspective, multi-disciplinary, multi-sector perspective, we can actually get gains and wins on all of those fronts. So if we address the climate crisis and the nature crisis and give ourselves a more sustainable and healthy natural environment upon which to build our future, we also benefit economically from that, because the more sustainable and resilient to climate shocks we are, the better our economy will be going forward. We'll have fewer sick days, fewer absenteeisms from work, because if we have people that feel that they have a responsible government, that they have an environment to be out and about in that's actually good for their health, that they can access easily during their working day or from their home, then we will have healthier people contributing to that healthier future. And there are countries that are doing this. I mean, I'll just mention straight up Bhutan. Now, has anyone heard of Bhutan's Gross National Happiness Index? So they have an entirely different approach to economy. The index is based on surveys from the Bhutanese people, and it's all about considering the happiness of their population as their major index of success, not GDP, not gross domestic profit. There's also approaches, economic approaches like, donut economics from Kate Raworth, which suggests that we need to live within the donut. And if we're exceeding our boundaries and we're going outside of those, then, we need to sort of rein ourselves back in. And we can have metrics and measurements to do that within economic systems, which are already being established. There's such a thing as a well-being economy. It kind of links to the two that I've just mentioned. And did you know that Scotland, New Zealand, and Finland are well-being economies? So within our political structures, we have well-being economies, and that means that we have a commitment to the health and well-being of the people and the planet. And that those are some of the structures that we use in terms of our top priorities for government, that it's fair, it's green, and it's growing. And not growing GDP, but growing good people and growing good places. Those are the things that we can certainly work towards as we think about our economic approaches and our structures. Yeah. So those are some little good news stories to lead on to from what Iain said, but I definitely don't want to detract from the amount of work that needs to be done and the amount of buy-in we need to have to those kinds of approaches and away from that extractive economic growth model that doesn't take into consideration the finite resources and the well-being of the people that are working to develop that well.
So can I jump in on the back of that? Yeah. There's so much in there. No, I want to be absolutely reiterate the vision for prosperity and a sustainable economy in Scotland and England, and I see Johannesburg is in South Africa mentioned there is enormously positive. There's an entire genre of art around. We look at the steampunk version of the world. I'm getting that slightly wrong. I'll remember which punk version it is. That it explores what these landscapes can look like. What we fail to do in the sustainability arena, I think, is provide those really good pictures and stories. I think we can maybe come back to that later. We too much have hair shirts, and you're going to miss out, and your prices are going to go up. But also our opponents have been far too good at pointing these things out, and we've not countered that with the. Wouldn't it be amazing to live in a fully insulated home where you didn't have a monthly electricity bill? Wouldn't that be, it's cost of living crisis. Well, that'll take a knock on that. That we can live in a house that breathes, that doesn't have damp, that we can walk to the places that we want to be, and we can play in nature. So I'm a heavy advocate of the wellbeing economy that Rebecca talks about. I'm part of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Scotland, and I author on it regularly. There's a fantastic film coming out doing a tour at the moment called Purpose, which is with some screenings across Scotland, which explores the wellbeing economy. And to pick up on some of Rebecca's things about what replaces. So the wellbeing economy very much says, you manage what you measure. So we've got to look at what goals we set, and beyond the becoming a sort of a set of indicators. And some of the things, just to give you an idea of how the indicators would work and how human they are. So I've spent time with Catherine Trebek talking about alternative GDP measures, and one of them was talking of girls riding bikes. So if every month or every quarter, the Scottish government, the UK government had to stand up there and say there are no more women and girls riding bikes. Now think about all of the things that have to happen before that goes up. We've got to have safe, well-lit streets. We've got to have wide pavements. We've got to have infrastructure. We've got to have skills. We've got to have a safe cultural environment for women and girls to be in public. There is so many things that think, geez, that life sounds a lot better, and we can measure it at the top. There was some work done at a Danish municipality where they did this collaborative approach of working about what should our goals be for this municipality. And one of the goals they came up with is being more people are happy to go to work on a Monday morning. Again, just think about the nature of work that is created, that we're not going there, and the quality of weekend that you've had and the time off that you've had. So we're able to sort of produce these different systems goals. And then the excellent thing about a systems goal is all of the infrastructure and institutions then funnel in to create that new systems goal. So I think it's really important, and it's vital that what we've not done, and picking up on Rebecca's point, is really produce these sumptuous pictures of what life could be that's better. And it's not just saving a little bit money on your electricity bill by insulating your homes. It's about, if we take the UK and as Keir Starmer's view of all the houses we're going to build, it's about whether these are going to be 250,000 wimpy homes with garages that are too small to get a car in, or are they going to be the sort of places that were built during the 1920s, the garden cities, which were wonderful places with great space standards, livable gardens, connections to nature. So I think that we've got to change what our leaders believe in, but we've got to also change the stories that we have to do that inspiration, while keeping the point of this is a crisis and we need to do it. We need to do it now.
Yeah, I think because I work in the engineering consultancy business, and one of the things I am, I suppose, scared of is that phrases like well-being economy seem to be all good and well when the financial economy is doing well, and they are the first things to go by the wayside. We're I suppose seeing that happen, where governments are rolling back on their previous sustainability commitments. We have big, well-known companies doing the same, rolling right back. So I suppose one of the key things I would like to mine from the two of you is what we can do as leaders to actually get people to take this seriously and recognize how important it is. I think you've both painted a very clear picture about why this is important, but I suppose how do we go about when it feels like the world is going in one direction? How do we lasso that and bring it not just back to the centre, but off to the opposite direction?
Well, I guess I'll just dive in and say, there's perhaps an assumption in the way that you've asked that question that people don't care about it. So I want to just counter that to start with as we take this discussion forward, because actually people across the world and in the political spectrum and in business, they do care about it. There's really unprecedented levels of belief in climate change and understanding of the crisis, but there's a perception gap. People underestimate how many other people think the same way as they do on this particular issue. So we have a perception gap. governments will change policy if they think there's a strong public backing. The problem that we have is that people across the world underestimate how many other people care about climate change. So across the world, we've got between 70 to 100%, certainly 90 plus in every country in the world that we can possibly survey on this topic, think that there is a problem. So it's 83% in the United Kingdom, it's 77% in the United States, 93% in Brazil. This is the share of people who believe in climate change and think it's a serious threat to humanity. So not just, oh yeah, I've heard of that, but I think it's a serious threat to humanity. Where the numbers start to reduce is the number of people who think the policies that we currently have are supporting tackling climate change, and the numbers of people who think that other people care about climate change. So what we need to be doing is having a conversation anytime we can within our work, within our communities, within our family. And it absolutely needs to be, there's just a comment coming from John saying about it being taught. It is being taught at school. I know that it's being taught at school, but it sometimes isn't being taught as explicitly as perhaps we could be. And perhaps not with the kind of solutions focus that we ought to be putting in there as well. So I think the question was around, what do we need to do to get people to believe in this? And my response is that people do believe in this, but we're not acting on what the public think. And that's not just from a national perspective, it's from a global perspective. And when I say we, I think there's that step up in leadership. We each have to be a leader, no matter what level of our organization we're in. We need to be seen to be caring about these things, because the more they're explicitly talked about in our workplaces, in our schools and colleges, and in our political fora, the more we write to our MPs. I know it seems like maybe you always get told to write to your MPs, but they don't get that many letters from people that care about stuff like this. They get letters about potholes. We need to make sure that we're also telling them that we care about this. We need to ask questions across the board, like, well, what can we do? What are we doing? Should we be doing more? And the answer to that last question is almost certainly yes. And one of the things that we can do is we can think about our systems and our processes. We can ask a question at any juncture. Could we be doing this differently? Are we just doing this because we've always done it this way? Why have we always done it this way? Could we do it differently? You can almost always ask that question. Who do we bank with? Who does our organization bank with? And where are they investing our funds? Because we know that like millions and millions go to fossil fuels from our banks and our pensions and things like that. So there's loads of different ways that we can have a really positive impact. And sometimes even just suggesting those things within our own personal leadership role and within any of the areas and spheres of influence that we have, sitting on a board, asking a question in the board or in the trust that you might be involved with. Do we know where this investment's coming from? Could we be investing our own pensions differently? Could we be thinking about ways in which we could stop having an unknown impact on this? Because I think a lot of people don't realize that because of the financial systems that have been discussed already in this webcast, we do actually support, perhaps unwittingly, fossil fuel extraction and emissions through the constructed financial pathways that we benefit from and that we use both in our personal and professional life. So there's a lot of people that really care about this, Iain, and taking the conversation forward. I would love to think about, well, what should we do about it then? If so many people are already on board, that's not the question. The question is us all changing our behaviours and us all really forefronting the issue so that collectively and collaboratively we can make a difference.
I would echo so much of what Rebecca was saying there. I mean, I think if you look at the literature on taking action on climate change, knowing about the climate crisis, knowing about the greenhouse effect is necessary but not sufficient. So you will, and that's anyone who's got any had children knows that telling them something so they know it is not necessarily the same thing as them having actually done the action you're hoping to. So it's sort of necessary but not sufficient. What we have to move on to then is solutions and stories that sell the solutions. It's about, so the Climate Solutions Programme, which I developed along with the Royal Scottish Geographic Society and a number of authors. We explicitly took that position and we said, well, what we've got to do is take the solutions into every sphere of your life. We've got to make sure that as whoever we're focusing on, we're looking to change your identity around this, to say that being climate change ready, as we describe it, or understanding the causes, impacts, and solutions to climate change is an essential trait of a leader. It's an essential trait of someone working in business, and the way that we within the education process, from the deep learning for sustainability approach we took, it was about embedding this into people's lives, and keeping the stories flowing of how they can be better at their role. One of the other approaches, the thing that Rebecca was talking about that really resonating was this. That notion of there is more of us who are for this than against this. And I think in a university, I often feel like this, that if we were to just get everybody in a field and say, who's working on sustainability or nature-related issues, can you stand here? And everybody who's not, can you just sort of move to the side? There'd be a tiny number of people who are there. But I don't think our universities are structured in a way to recognise that, that we feel isolated. So I'm also part of an organisation called the Global Tipping Points Report Group, and these are the people who tell us really cheery stuff about when we're going to lose the Greenland ice sheet and when the North Atlantic currents are going to stop turning. But they also have a really positive section, which is the one I'm part of, is about positive tipping points, about positive social tipping points, and looking to see when round about that 20 to 25% of people get to a point of change, and then we see quickly systems moving into new states. And I've got a session at the next conference in June where I'm bringing an old professor of mine, Jared Hastings. Jared is one of these people who has saved hundreds of thousands of lives during his career because he was him and Linda Bold at Edinburgh University behind the anti-tobacco legislation that we've seen in the UK and New Zealand and Australia for the last 30 years. And his approach within the tipping points was to give was not to use in tobacco. The typical approach was, you'll die of cancer, you'll have a horrible death, etc. They really tried to avoid that. So with the teenagers, for example, they used stories about well, people want to kiss you, you'll smell bad, all these things that mattered to teenagers as a way of getting them. The idea of me dying in 40 years' time of lung cancer, that's not important to me, but whether that girl's going to kiss me or not is much, much more important. And so understanding what motivated people. Mm-hmm. The other side of what you really brought in, and I think this is how we can get people to believe it's important, but let's not underestimate what we call the negative feedback loops and the deliberate dampening effects. So these are the sort of tipping points caused by the oil and gas industry and the fossil fuel industry. The way that they've invaded the COP spaces, the lines and the stories that they've put together about action on climate change is expensive. We had a political leader the other day up here talking about net stupid zero. It's something that has been. That's not a mistake or an accident. That's a tested line that's coming from their supporters. So we have these. We've got to educate ourselves. We've got to make sure that education comes through about the causes and impact. We've got to then move into the stories of how the solutions are there and how they're going to make us better people with better business, better at business, better leaders with better lives for the customers that we serve. But let's not forget about the dampening effects that are out there for the people who are trying to make sure that they stay in charge of our monthly energy bill. The worst thing for oil and gas company is inflation, because then we don't have to sell you a gas to heat your home. They want to stay in charge of our energy futures, and I've been focused on that, and have been working for years to make sure that they do so. So bringing Jared Hastings to the Tipping Points Coalition was basically to say, we fought the tobacco industry for 30, 40 years. The tobacco industry had this PR playbook that the oil and gas industry are now using. So let's make sure that we recognise that we are in this antagonistic environment, calling out the language that is designed to, as you said, you go back to your question, how we retract backwards. It's not a mistake. It's not an accident. This is a high, and there's things like Influence Watch, which will demonstrate where this has been done. There was a lovely paper in Nature just in the last week looking at all of this, how the side events at COPs have changed as the fossil fuel industry have come into it, and how they're changing. So we have to recognise both of these things. So people do believe it's important, but we've got to improve the stories about how it's going to make their lives better. And we've got to recognise that there are bad faith actors in this. And those bad faith actors are the ones that are creating the cost of living crisis, because what it really should be called is a fossil fuel cost of living crisis, because we didn't insulate our homes, we didn't electrify our energy systems at a community level, and we keep shifting our food across global scales that keep the price up. So I think that's where I would just sort of put in there about the belief what we do about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very difficult, isn't it, for people to move forward, to move away from the norms when it feels harder to do that because of these huge influences that are trying to keep the norms in place. And that is, as you say, we can equate it to lots of different things, including sort of, ultra-processed food industry, the tobacco industry, vapes more recently, things like that, which are, relentlessly marketed to young people and make a really quick, big buck for a few players and actually cause a huge amount of environmental and public health harm. And so we've got a lot of competition. We've got a lot of people kind of detracting from this collaborative and positive kind of narrative. And I think part of the learning about being sustainable on the planet is being aware of that, looking out for it and trying to avoid those negative influences. So yeah, absolutely echo what Iain's saying, and I think that's what makes it really difficult for people to path forward, because there's so much attention from big players with a lot of influence who are trying to kind of stay the course.
Yeah, but I suppose I would take a positive around. It's more around it. So I've understood from what you've both said. There's a piece maybe around more changing the perception or closing the perception gap rather than getting people to think this is important in the first place, and that seems like a less scary challenge. That's amazing. I could listen to both of you talk about this for hours and hours and hours. There have been quite a few questions coming through, and I'm conscious that time is moving forward. So I wondered if we could sort of move to one of the questions that was asked in advance, and then there's a couple that have come through in the chat that I'm very keen to. But I think it was Katie had asked in advance, do you have any tips on how to engage with senior leaders with sustainability? So from perhaps a slightly more someone who is on their leadership and management journey, how they can talk up rather than necessarily waiting for instruction to come down.
Yeah. I mean, this is something we've certainly seen with our Climate Solutions Programme. We run individual sessions with 30 individuals in a room, but also we run them for specific organisations. And we've found out a couple of times where those sort of younger middle managers have been really energised, and they've been developing their plans on how they can improve. They've done what Rebecca was talking about in terms of looking to change systems, and then they've got to the board. And the board is made up of people later in their career who've got there because they made the company grow and slashed costs and did things that they were told to do during the 80s and 90s, and haven't had to manage carbon in that mix. They've managed the economy, rather than the carbon or the sustainable environment and society. So where we found that was really interesting is just about those ongoing issues that any leader and any manager has to deal with, which is about getting the right staff, keeping them motivated. It's about also talking their language about the long-term damage that is coming to their business, and the shocks that are coming to their business if they've got global supply chains, or even national supply chains. It's about making the case that if you're going to go and spend your money on an offsetting scheme in the north of Scotland by buying some land, that might look good in the short term, but there's a fair old chance that if you the approaches that are cheap to do are not going to work. We've got an example of Microsoft blowing $200 million by investing in a logging avoidance scheme. So they basically allowed this area not to be logged, and that was supposed to be in some way offsetting. And of course, in the northwest of America, the forest went on fire. So the 200 million was lost. The carbon went up in the air, and the reputational damage that comes from it. Brewdog have had the same problem with their lost forest that became such a part of their greenwashing activity. We found that 96% of the broadleafs and 52% of the coniferous forest that they planted died because they just stuck it in the ground and kind of walked away. So it's bringing those things into the scope, but recognizing that maybe what got you to the board level is not what is required. So thinking about to think of it in their terms, but then with any leadership, with passion, with knowledge, with commitment, with understanding your target. Who's the key person on the board? What are the stories that they're going to get them to move? And it's one of the other things that we talk about when we're talking about changing systems, that we all live in these nested systems. We all live knowing someone who's the most powerful person we know. And that person can be 10 stories to 10 gaps away from the Prime Minister, or they might be the Prime Minister. But we all know somebody who's more powerful than us, and how we can work at them to engage, and knowing how to engage with them to shift them in a way that then escapes through the organisation.
Yeah, I mean, really good points, Iain. And I would add in response to Katie's question, if I may, and Iain, that I think, it's kind of like approach it in the way that you would any other ask. You have to kind of figure out, well, what is it that they want to achieve? Start where they are. If you want to manage up, if you want to influence up, then surely the people that are in those positions that you want to speak to, they've got some objectives. And there's almost always a way that you can link sustainability or climate action to whatever objectives you could imagine. So whether it's, I think somebody's put a comment about healthcare in the chat, there's financial reasons why it's a good idea to take measures that are more sustainable. There's worker satisfaction and all sorts of different reasons that you could find to take these actions. So if there's something that that those leaders who you're trying to persuade are trying to achieve, figure out a way to connect that to climate change, figure out a way to connect that to sustainability. It's like doing an elevator pitch to a politician. You have to be talking their language about something they care about or that they have to action. And if you're not doing that, it will probably fall on deaf ears. So just like any good community consultation approach or any good kind of management approach, figure out what's important to the person who is your audience and link your issue to the things they care about, to their issues. And that is almost always a really good starting point for a conversation, because once you start the conversation, you have an opportunity to continue it. So I would say do it that way, like you would with another issue you wanted to take to somebody in influence.
Yeah, good. Two great answers to a great question. Thank you. Right, I think we've got maybe 2 or 3 minutes. There's 2 others that have come through that I would really like to run past you. One's from Lee. And it's a really interesting question. It's, what other opportunities are there to educate young people moving away from schools? Are there any insights from other places where learning about sustainability has a bigger impact than schools? It's a great question. And if we can get maybe a 90-second response, that does it justice.
And I think it'd be very.
Iain, you start, because you've been doing a lot of public engagement with this.
I think so. I'm a big believer in the power of community projects. That learning by doing. That if you're leaving school and there is something that there's a particular thing you're interested in, and getting involved with that community project, whether it's rewilding, whether it's replanting, whether it's local food, whether it's a repair workshop, etc. These learning by doing places are enormously powerful. To upskill, to bring the community benefits to it, and all the enjoyment of it, all of these things, giving connection to people in these difficult time, and then you're able to look out and connect, because these community groups are connected to other community groups, but they're also the sort of things that politicians love to turn up to and put their arm around and get a nice cheesy photo with, and it gives you the opportunity to say, why is this so difficult? Why can't we get the land to do this? Why are the grants not there? Why are you focusing on extracting? So how are you going to make doing these things easier? So I think the power of community and community groups is a great place to go and there's a wealth of good resource online, sort of a climate literacy sense that's online for free, but put it into your life via a community group.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of really good opportunities for just self-directed learning online. So if anybody, we know that lots of people do care about this. And we also know, because Iain and I have been involved in creating resources to enable people to access more information about this. So, I've just done a series of climate podcasts by an organisation called SAGES. So you can find out about ice caps and glaciers and what that's all about if you want to, or just get an overview from the first couple of episodes about, well, what is climate change and what can I do about it? Both of us try to communicate to different audiences in non-technical language with a solutions focus to try and help people to self-direct that learning. And so there's a lot of free information out there. So please do go and look it up. But other experiences are, scouts and guides and boys brigade. There's lots of individuals in those organizations that are bringing in speakers, that are doing activities outdoors in nature, creating learning. There's community orchards, community growing groups, loads of amazing organizations outside of school. And maybe just to finish, I teach at university, and I have returners to education, people that are already have careers and they've had families. And the other day I was teaching about climate scenarios, and Andy, bike mechanic, who's one of my students on civil engineering, he just looked a little bit crestfallen at the end of this climate change scenario slide. And I said, what's up, Andy? Did that hit quite hard for you? And he said, you showed the climate into the future for somebody born in 2020. And my son was born in 2020. And you've just shown me a snapshot of what a future climate is going to look like for my own child. And I had never really understood what climate change meant for me and my family until I looked at that slide. Now, I've been teaching Andy for 3 or 4 years. Sometimes it's only a particular message that lands in a particular way. And that's at university. So outside of schools, there's great stuff going at college and at university. People are picking up on these messages at different times and in different contexts. And I think it's beholden upon those of us that do communicate about these things to try and communicate in different ways and from different contexts to make sure that we do try and, help people to access the information that can empower them to make the change that they want to see. And I know that we're really running out of time. And I think I'll just finish with maybe one sentence. And that is that, I don't know what you think about as home. It's probably the place where you go to eat and sleep at night after you've finished working. But ultimately, planet Earth is home for all of us. And just like we maintain our home and try and fix the hole in the roof, or, make sure that it's insulated or whatever it might be, we need to look after our collective planet Earth home. And if that isn't the biggest incentive to work with our colleagues and our families and our wider communities in whatever way we can, then I don't know what other incentive there is. We need to look after our home because it'll look after us.
That seems like a lovely sentiment to close on. Thank you, Iain, Rebecca. Thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts and your insights today. I mean, I've found it so valuable. I've learned an awful lot. I really appreciate being able to access people like yourselves and listen to what you have to say. I think I'm going to bring Mike back in and just close us off. But really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your time and your input today.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting us.
Indeed. Thank you very much indeed. It's been fantastic fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of you. Special thank you to our host, Iain Tinniswood. Big thank you to Professor Iain Black and Dr. Rebecca Wade for your insight, expertise. And it's a shame we've run out of time, but it was very inspiring and challenging. So thank you very much. Please stay tuned to hear more about CMI membership. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Don't forget, as a CMI member, you can find the latest management and leadership insights at managers.org.uk. If you're not yet a member, join our community to discover CMI Confidence with on-demand resources, our network of mentors, and industry-leading accreditations.